Hello and welcome to your Wednesday dose of wealth wisdom with me, Daniel Kennedy, your host for episode 50. I've been a bit quiet of late due to the current situation. I didn't feel that I had any say or input that was really worthwhile for the whole COVID-19 situation. I didn't want to capitalise on all the fear. It just really didn't sit well with me, so that's why I cut the content off. So now I'm slowly bringing it back to the forefront. And I've still been chatting to lots of the Wealth Dragon students, and today's topic is about how to ensure you have an unshakable mind and ethos. Because I've been asked, because obviously we're all losing money, myself included, no one's immune from this. Some people may be able to make money, but as landlords as a whole, we're indirectly being affected, whether that be people moving out, people not moving in, not being able to do viewings. It's costing us. And a few panicked people within the network have been asking, like, why do you seem so unaffected with what's going on? And you don't really seem too bothered that you're losing money. You don't really seem too worried about how long this is going on. And they have also explained that they're literally really, really fearful, and it's really stressful, and there's nothing that they can think about. They're over the edge. They maybe haven't prepared as well as they should have done, and they just said, "How do you cultivate an ethos where you don't really care?" And the answer that I gave to them was one that most people wouldn't really understand. So I thought I'd explain it in one of the podcast episodes. And the ethos that I have is that we are so insignificant in the whole time span of the whole universe that to get upset over a problem, it's kind of an arrogant thing, because you think that you matter, but in reality we really, really don't. We are such a blink in the cosmos. So like, any problem that you have and you get upset over it, I think it's wasted time, because I always say time is finite. It's very, very finite. So worrying about money, worrying about maybe potentially going under, and making that really affect your life in a negative way, isn't going to help solve the problem. Jumping into that paralyzed status of me being a victim and me trying to panic, and nothing wrong with reaching out for help, nothing wrong with finding solutions, but that the whole view is every problem that I have, I see it as an insignificant problem. It could always be worse. And one way that I do this is I have a little ritual every Sunday where I find someone in history that's made my life better, and I thank them. This is a bit of an unusual thing, and I don't tell too many people this, but I'll share it here because it helps me. It's from the person who invented roads that made it easier for me to get around, from the person who invented electricity or the types of carpet that I walk on, and the person who invented the clothes and the way, every Sunday I find someone in history, do a bit of research, and I thank them. And whether it would be the person who learned how to dye clothes, the first soldier that learned how to scale a wall, so we have the society that we have. I go really, really far out in the way that I thank people, and I also look at things at what I have today that I'm really, really thankful for. And when I think about the constant good things that are going on in my life, the problems pale in insignificance. I'll obviously give time to them, and I'll give patience to them, and I'll try and overcome them the best that I can, but it's out of our control. COVID-19 is out of our control. So getting upset, getting worried, and letting it affect the time that you have right now is something that I can brush off easily, because say if some of us go under, it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. If you've really over leveraged and you're not very liquid, liquidity is king at the moment, and that's why I always preach frugality. I always preach being safe and having so much in your deals that if it goes wrong, and having a system where you factor in that you are a human and you will make mistakes and there will be a crisis. You don't know what the crisis is, but we know from history crises are going to happen. Whether that be you choose a bad builder, whether that be we have a worldwide pandemic, whether that be the government then decides not to help landlords. If it wasn't COVID-19, it would be something else. And that's why I have a very nonchalant view of it. And loads of people are in way worse conditions than the people that are just losing money and maybe losing properties, and maybe you've still got your health, you've still got your family, you've still also, what's more important, You've got the knowledge to get back to where you were before. The market isn't going to change too drastically. Maybe some companies will work more from home. Some may really battle the hatches down and say this is how we're going to operate from a future because it's more cost effective, more work gets done, less commuting, less pollution. Look at the planet, look at what's happening because we're all indoors. Who knows where it's going to go, but everyone will have their own direction. But you yourself, you already have the knowledge of where you got to previously before COVID-19. Yeah, that's still yours. You can do it again. If it takes time, it takes time. Property has always been a long-term play, but even if you were to go under, it's a lesson. It's not the end. It's just another feather in your cap that you have in your toolbox that you know I messed up there, so this is what I'm going to do differently next. And the really enduring theme is it's all the renters. Like within our little network, everyone preaches don't do rent to rent. It's a short-term answer to a long-term problem. Your margins are too thin. You there's not much flexibility, but it gets touted as the golden goose. It gets touted as this is the way to earn money when you don't have any property yourself. When really you're just kicking the can down the road. And these people are now struggling. It's I'm not going to name names, but it's very, very likely that some of them will have to hand these properties back. And the rent-to-rent business will be in tatters, probably the reputation with the landlords. But they've still got the knowledge and they can recover. And this is why I always am on the side of don't do rent-to-rent. Learn the ability to raise finance, get the capital, get the asset, buy, refurb. You control the asset. Your payments are way lower in comparison to a rent-to-rent. So like, for instance, one of our 8 beds, the mortgage is only 1,200, where the rent roll is 4K and bills everything. It's about 60% of that's profit. So if we have a tenant that loses their job, I'm not going to be an arse and be like, you need to pay. We've got a few now that are self-employed and they've been fine for the last 3-4 years. And there's some people that get that puff their chest up and say, no, they need to pay. I'm not going to kick somebody when they're down, because finding a good tenant, that is the golden goose in property. It's not rent to rent. It's not whatever it is. It's finding a good tenant. And if they come on hard times, giving them a few months off isn't too much of a problem in the grand scheme of things, because I've got rooms that are empty. Would I want to house a tenant temporarily for nothing at my cost because he's paid for, or she's paid 3-4 years on the dot? Maybe a few times I've paid late, but we're all human, and that's probably because of my systems. So yeah, absolutely, I'm going to let them wipe that debt off, and I'm not even going to make them pay it back, because it's all contingencies within the business. And this is why I'm so nonchalant about it, because the margins are so big. I'm not going to see any of the money anyway. All it means is the investors are going to have to invest a few more years, or depending on how long this goes. It just means instead of maybe paying it off in 3 years, I'll pay it off in 4 years, or I'll pay it off in 5 years, whatever the case may be. So having the ability and knowing that the knowledge is important. The problems are always going to be there. So I spoke to another example. We had a good friend. We met up recently, and he said, I've paused everything because of a divorce. And I said, that is a really shit excuse. If it wasn't a divorce, it would be something else. There's always going to be hurdles for you to not get involved in property. There's always going to be that reasons why you shouldn't invest, that reason why you shouldn't buy stocks, that reason why you shouldn't put yourself out there and try and raise finance. Trust me, the excuse factory in your brain is a phenomenal piece of equipment. It is so vivid, it is so spot on, and you have to fight against that by your habits, by your daily habits. So cultivating a mindset where it's not to say you don't care, it's not to say that you're not proactive in seeing these problems coming, but not letting it affect you emotionally. Like if I was an angry person, or if I had a really, really big ego and I was really sure of the public face that I presented, and then I have a problem, and then it makes it even worse, the fall. Like, knowing that there will be a fall, and you preach about it, you say there is going to be a fall, there is going to be a crisis, there is going to be a shrink. When it happens, you don't look like the fool, because you haven't presented yourself as this infallible individual. And no one is infallible. Everyone is human, everyone makes mistakes, and everyone is going to have financial implications for whatever those mistakes may be. No one, like, I've spoken to lots and lots of people. Like, I've probably done, I don't know anyone who's done more education than myself, other than my immediate mentors. And everyone that I chat to, and I always dig, I don't say what went good, what went, what was your biggest win. I ask, if you went under, what would you do differently? Like, how did you survive during the 2007, 2008 is specifically what I asked. And the enduring theme was, I over leveraged, I was spending the profits before I made them, and liquidity, which makes sense as we now live in this sort of dystopian time where there's no money, that the economy's frozen, and very likely the property prices will go down. And people are asking, well, what are your thoughts? I was like, what goes up must comes down, what goes down must comes up. It's all, but this is a little bit different, because it's not the banks, and like, banks have never had more money than they've ever had at the moment, and the interest rates are low. There's still demand for property, but it's obviously the economic activity that's shrinking. So that's why this is a little bit different. But for sure, we're heading into a recession. If not, we were going to do anyway. It was due. We know it. It's the cycle that happens with the fiat currency. Now, I don't pretend to be an expert on this. I just look at the past and just know humans are the same. There's nothing really special about how we think. There's nothing really special about how you think. Like, sorry to tell us, like, we're all just like farts in the cosmos. That's how quickly our lives blink by. And eventually we'll all be forgotten, and no one will know what impact we've had. We might impact a few people for a few years, but basically we're all the same, figuratively, and the cycle is going to continue to happen, and people are going to continue to be shocked by things that have happened in the past that just reoccur over and over and over again. And for some reason I can't really relate to that, because I know there's going to be a recession. I know that, like, you think COVID-19 is probably going to be the worst pandemic of our generation, or the worst crisis. There's going to be others, of course, whether that be a complete, like, free fall for the stock market, whether that be I don't know, like, one of the economies just blowing up and absolutely collapsing and bringing the whole world economy with it. Like, this will not be the last time we're in a crisis. I promise you that. It just won't be. Like, look at the past, look what has happened previously, and prepare yourself accordingly. And then when you expect that there's going to be a crisis, and when you expect that you're going to make mistakes, whatever the case may be, when it comes, you're not shocked, you're not panicked, you're not emotional about it. So therefore, you can potentially present yourself as somebody who doesn't really get bothered by things. But obviously, I understand COVID-19 is a very, very severe and catastrophic situation for most people. And my advice remains the same as it always been, is live frugally, have good reserves, and really sort of work on your ability to raise finance and delay gratification, because property is a long game, and it's all about trying to stay liquid, trying to stay in the black, to allow the capital appreciation to give you a life much better on later on in the future. It's not about getting rich today, spending the money, driving a flash car, going on this ego trip that so many people now are really, really stuck for. Like, fancy buying a jet and then cutting off half your workforce. Like, what the deuce? Who would do that? And now that person's credibility is absolutely out the window. Like, for me, it's obviously that person's a billionaire. I'm not. I never will be. But I'm always going to be small, steady, slowly growing, slowly stretching that comfort zone. Screw the 10x. Like, that's ridiculous. Do things slowly, learn, become the master of that area, and then grow slowly, and also have big reserves. Know that how much money you need to last 12 months without money coming in. And this might sound harsh, but if you're struggling after a month of no income, you haven't got a business, you've got a hobby. Like, you shouldn't be, in my opinion, be in control of people's accommodation if you're struggling after a month of reserves. Like, what is that? Obviously, we're hurting financially, and I get that. I understand that's never a good thing. But to react in a way that so many people have of, oh, I'm having a rant, oh, it's us again, or I'm self-employed, I create jobs, I do this. That's what we go into when we decide to have businesses. We take the risk, but we also take the reward. I'm just shocked that all these people that post on Instagram of, oh, this is fantastic, this is wonderful, motivation, doing the work, all that bullshit. And then the first hurdle they come in, oh, I'm a victim. Like, I'm shocked at how many people have jumped into that. And I don't have sympathy, I'm afraid, because this is the same people. It's just full of hypocrites, is what I've seen. And we read all the self-help books, and we all know about staying grounded. We all say not being reactionary and being proactive. And then I've just seen swaths of the population just jump on this bandwagon of I'm a victim, when in reality there are people in much worse conditions than us, and people thinking of their pockets before the whole wider situation of the society. So in summary, how to make sure that you have a resolve where you're not quite affected by the knocks that will come, no matter who you are. They'll come, be that a deal falling through, you losing your person who raises money, or whatever the case. There will be crises. And so what do you do in a situation where you know there's going to be a crisis? It's simple. It's clear as day to anybody who thinks about it logically. Have reserves. So this is what I do. I have 12 months of personal expenses, and it's not that much because I live really frugally, and I have 6 months of business expenses. So if I had no money coming in, personally I'd last for 12 months, and business wise I'd last for 6 months. And if I dip under that number for some emergency or some fund, I stop going out. I stop having coffee. I stop eating out until we get back to that number, because it's so important to me that to have those reserves. After speaking to, and I'll mention his name as well because his advice was so good. It was so good about having lots of liquidity and not spending the profit before you make it. And it's really sort of lodged in my brain with like we had a 4 or 5 hour chat, and that's Jim Halibut. He has got really, like, his model now is so like crisis proof. I know he's not hurting now. Like he knew that it was coming. He knew that something else would come. He knew that there would be like trees in the road that he would have to navigate. And I would highly, highly recommend anybody who can chew his ear for a few hours about how to handle a crisis is get in a room with him. And that's it, basically. That's my take on it. So how to become nonchalant and not be emotionally affected is recognize that we're really not any different. Like, these crises are going to happen. So when you know they're going to happen, and they do, it's not so much as a shock. Like, try not to get emotionally attached to anything. Like, money comes and goes. It's never yours. It's never mine. It's only our turn to use it. And what goes out will come in if you keep the knowledge. Like, the knowledge is the most important thing. Property is a long-term game, so there are going to be wobbles in the road. And you've just got to stick to your guns, stay liquid. My personal goals are 12 months personal expenses, 6 months company expenses. And some of you might say, oh, that's very easy for you. It's not easy. It's not easy to maintain that. And to get there initially was very, very difficult, because you have to save quite a lot. I don't spend the money before I see it, even though I have that fund. And when stuff goes wrong in the properties, that's what I use. So when it's depleted, I don't spend anything until that gets repleted. And then I invest on top of that. And that's how I'm going to continue to do the business. So I doubt it very much that any sort of economic collapse, I could manage a decline in income over quite a few years before there was any worry, or there was any urge to sort of be reckless and sell the assets, because you want to keep property as long as you possibly can, because it's going to beat inflation. It always does, it always has, it always will. Since the Doomsday Book, property prices, area dependent of course, have doubled every so often. Like, maybe, I think the average, it's been purported as 7 years, but I think it's closer to now 10, 11 as it slows down and we reach sort of like the late stages of capitalism. But practice gratitude, have liquidity, know that there's going to be a crisis, and try and fight the urge to jump on the victim bandwagon. Sorry, try it. It's not going to serve you. It's not going to serve those around you, and you're going to come out the other end looking a bit silly to those who are going to be in this long term. Like, I've got a list of people who I know I'm never getting involved with business now because of how they've reacted to this and how they've jumped on, this is a victim, this is after all this, it's very difficult. And yeah, there are going to be problems, but how you react to them is way more important than the problem itself, in my view. Right, thanks for your time. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you get a bit of benefit from it. And if you are suffering, know that this is not going to be a comforter, but this won't be the worst hurdle that you have. It won't. It's being involved in property and growing as we did in the last 5 years, and just you think it gets worse, and then something else happens, and then something else happens. And you become resilient to it, so you have to. And if that's not for you, then property isn't for you. If you're not that type of person who can become resilient to all the issues, just even last night, I had a tenant get a neighbour in a headlock because he thought he was stealing his bike, and I was on the phone for about 4 or 5 hours trying to solve that situation. Like that, you're going to get problem after problem after problem after problem, and the reward that seems to be when you solve this problem is you get to deal with a higher quality of problem. There is no destination that you reach where you think you've made it. There's always a different issue, there's always a different crisis, there's always a different hurdle to overcome, and that's what I'm going to sign off on. Thank you for your time, and enjoy your evening.